Hello, everyone. Welcome to Meet Our Second Pinterest Batching Party. So I'm really glad you're here because that means you are excited about making some content for Pinterest and loading it into your Edgar library so that you're set and with a strategy for your Pinterest posting. Right over here, there is a chat box. I would just love to know who's here. So introduce yourself, let me know you can hear me okay, and let us know what industry you're in. One of my favorite things about getting to create community here at Meet Edgar is bringing small business owners together so that you guys can network on these webinars as well. So if you see someone in your industry that you want to connect with, don't be afraid to pop on into the chat and connect with people. So we are super excited here at Meet Edgar to go ahead and announce our Pinterest integration so that you can start amplifying your messages out to Pinterest. So today we're going to look a little bit about how to actually add content into Edgar for Pinterest, and we're also going to look at just some really great Pinterest specific strategies. If you have not yet, we do have a Pinterest pack that you can download. It's just a link in Google Drive, and I will put it into the chat box. If you'd like to download these worksheets, it's a great place to start just to get ideas and to make sure your understanding Pinterest is a little bit different from other networks. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this into the chat here for you. Welcome, Ann Maris. Welcome from Houston, Texas. Excited to have you. Lisa, expressive arts therapist. Super exciting. Awesome. So keep your questions in the chat here. I'm going to wait till the end to do any bit of screen sharing in order to show you around the Edgar features, just because sometimes my computer can be wonky with the screen sharing. So we'll wait till the end there, but I'm going to share some slides and go over a few tips and tricks. But keep the chat going. If you do have questions, I will pop on in there. Go ahead and take that Google Drive link there if you wanted to go ahead and get those worksheets. But let's dive on in here. Oh, Sarah, you said your video is freezing. I would suggest going ahead and refreshing. Sometimes Demio can get a little bit freezy for you, but typically a good refresh will do the trick. If it keeps being bad, let me know in the chat there. I might go ahead and actually just shut off my camera as we're going through these slides, and maybe that'll go. All right. So as you are going throughout adding content into Edgar for Pinterest, you'll notice that when you click to add new content for Pinterest specifically, you have to enter a few different things than you do on other networks. Whenever you're starting to create content for a specific network, I always suggest thinking to yourself, why are people on that network? You know, what are they there for? So, you know, for example, on Twitter, people are there to consume content, but it's also a very conversational network, and it's good for like middle of the funnel stuff where companies are actually having engaging conversations with their followers. Or let's say Facebook groups, again, really good for engagement, really good for back and forth. Pinterest has a little bit different of a nature in the fact that it is there for people who want to be seeing what projects they can do, what they can start learning, and what they're actually going to plan for their future self. You know, so rather than being on a network that is going to be showing you photos or going to be showing you status updates from people, Pinterest is much more of a place where people are going to click on your links and going to actually consume that content. Yes, Lisa, I will go ahead and send out a recording afterwards as well. So no worries there. And I'll send you the slides too if you want them. So as you're starting to click to add new content to Pinterest in Meet Edgar, when you click add new content, you're going to be asked for a title. So that's going to be this really big part right up here, the part that says content upcycling. That's going to be what's showing as the title. So when in your composer in Edgar, when you click to add new content, just know that's what it's asking you for. Now, if you do not put a title in the title section of your pins within Meet Edgar, it's going to go ahead and automatically choose the title of your blog post. So you can go ahead and know that. But if you wanted to test a different title than your blog post has, go ahead and do that. The description part here is just going to be you writing in the text box within Meet Edgar. And then you can go ahead and create graphics to add to your pins as well. So just so you know, that title is the big part. The description is the text underneath. The graphic to the left, this is a pin that we took a screenshot of on our Pinterest account. The graphic to the left is the graphic that you're actually adding into Edgar. So this is what it looks like when you click to add new content within Meet Edgar. The description part is going to be in that main text box. And then you can see right underneath, this is a little bit different than when you're adding content into the library for the other networks. That top part there that says how to turn one video into 111 pieces of content, that's going to be the title. So the bigger text on this section here. And then that link is the destination link where you're sending people, and then the image is attached down below. So that's how it's going to look when you're clicking to add content into the composer in Meet Edgar. The other thing you want to be careful with when you're adding content to Edgar that's a little different than other networks is you'll notice on the left when you're assigning permissions to accounts, you do have to select boards. So if you're trying to save a post to your library and you're like, what the heck, it's not saving, it's probably because you forgot to do this extra step of selecting a board. And these will automatically pull in from the boards that you've set up on Pinterest. Now, the cool thing about using Edgar for Pinterest is you know that we are a category-based system of posting. And when you start to think about what boards are, they're essentially categories for your posts. So it aligns pretty perfectly with the strategy that we recommend taking for social media marketing, which is making sure you're rotating through different categories. However, Pinterest's nature is a little bit different than the other networks. So, you know, on the other networks, oftentimes we'll tell you to post 80% of your content being value-adding content, 20% a little bit more promotional. Pinterest is interesting in the fact that you can get away with posting up to like 50 times a day on Pinterest, and the algorithm is not going to dock you because it's much more of a search engine than the other networks. So as you're starting to think about the categories and the boards you're putting your pins into, remember you can pin something to multiple boards and you can pin something multiple times. So you just want to be thinking about the nature again that when people go to Pinterest, yes, they have a feed, they have a smart feed that's curated by the algorithm, but the nature of what people are doing on Pinterest is typically going to the search bar and searching for something. So whether it's, you know, home decorations, stuff like that, or blogging tips, they're using it like they would go to Google, much more so than they're just scrolling through their feed. So with that said, as I was mentioning that you can pin things multiple times and you can repeat your pins, again, we love evergreen marketing here at Meet Edgar, so we love that part of Pinterest. However, Pinterest does say you cannot pin something more than 5 times in 1 month. So a new pin to Pinterest, so you can't pin the exact same thing more than 5 times in a month. However, for Pinterest to see it as a new pin, all that needs to happen is for you to have a new graphic. So right here on this slide, this is actually something that we do with every single blog post or piece of content that we put out. We make 4 or 5 different graphics for the same blog post. So you can see the titles here, and these were simply made in Canva, which is a graphic design program. They have templates that are predetermined for the sizing that works really well on Pinterest. You know, Pinterest sizing is much more oriented towards that vertical 2-to-1 ratio there. And we just go in and make different images, put different graphics along with the title of the blog post. And now we can still reshare that same pin on Pinterest more than 5 times a month if we want, and to multiple boards. So again, if you have a system set up when you release a blog post and you have that system set up to go ahead and pull that blog post into Edgar, let's say, with our RSS feed feature, and we can look at that at the end if you want. But if you have a system set up like that already, perhaps something that you consider doing is sitting down every time you get a new blog post and having that checklist item that you're making 5 graphics and then adding these as variations in Edgar. So when you click to add new content in Edgar, you'll see a variations button on the composer screen. When you click to add a variation, a second text box is going to pop up. And this is where you can go ahead and attach each of these different graphics for that same post. That way, when Edgar is rotating through your content, depending upon the schedule that you set, he's going to choose a different variation, so a different graphic to send each time, just allowing you to post things more frequently on Pinterest, again, since they allow that much more so than other networks. And again, doing a lot of A/B testing to know what image and text combination is working well. So Melissa Griffin, this is from a screenshot from her Pinterest page here. If you're looking to learn more about Pinterest, I think she's a great educator. I would go ahead and look her up. She's got some great courses on it. But anyway, she has a really awesome aesthetic here, you can see, and you can notice the nature of her pins. So when I go to her Pinterest page, this is what I see in the top few pins. Now, awesome branding, something to consider for your pins. If you're using something like Canva, you can get a free account in Canva and actually make these templates so that they're replicable every time and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But make sure you're using consistent color schemes so that people recognize your pins. If someone recognizes that they like a pin that they've clicked on of yours before and that same color scheme catches their eye in the future, it's more likely your brain is going to pick up on that faster and be like, oh, wait a minute, I like that brand. I know it's subtle and it's small, but these details really do matter, especially on Pinterest, which is such a visual search engine. But the other thing that I want you to really notice about her pins here is the amount of text overlay on them. So you can absolutely go ahead and have graphics or have photos go out on Pinterest that are just photos. However, if you notice when you're on Pinterest yourself, your own behavior of searching, it doesn't really catch your eye when you're just scrolling through all of the search features unless there's text overlay on them. This text overlay here helps make sure that people know exactly what that pin is about. You know, you could go ahead and look at one of these photos of her smiling and not really know what that pin's about. That's what the text overlay is really great for. And you can notice you can put a pretty decent amount here. So I would go ahead and test different things. Yes, it's Melissa Griffin. I think Melissa is actually with a Y, Colleen. But yeah, if you Google that and Pinterest, she'll go ahead and pop up for sure. But definitely recommend doing this text overlay to grab people's eyes so that when they're scrolling through their feed, they know what they're going to get. Another thing that I love that she does with her pins that I would absolutely recommend that you think about doing is her calls to action. So you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, the pin that says how to write a killer about page. You'll notice that arrow right there points to something that says free worksheets. So this is actually a lead magnet that she's put out on Pinterest of some free worksheets that people can download and consume if they go to that pin. This is an awesome strategy. This little arrow call to action is something that's going to grab people in because they're like, oh, wait a minute, I want some free worksheets about writing a killer about page. So as you're doing your text overlay, look for these little areas that you can add a subtle call to action that's going to entice people to actually click through on that pin a little bit more. As with any social media marketing, the thing I really want you to remember is that your content on social media is great for driving traffic and it's great for getting engagement, but your main goal is to bring people to a place that you own online. You don't own Pinterest, you don't own what they do with your content. So you want to make sure you're sending people to your blogs and sending to capture their emails, which is what she's done here with this about page pin. If you follow that pin through, you're directed to go ahead and enter your email address to get those free worksheets. So she's using Pinterest in order to grow her email list, which is much more of warm leads that she can market to with a little bit better of an approach through email than just on social media. So Pinterest is awesome for this because people are there in a state where they want to learn something and they want to complete a project. They're not just there to touch base with their friends and family. So you need to be really thinking about the lead magnets that you have. So those free resources that you give to people in exchange for their email addresses and how you can make pins to entice people to actually go ahead and click on those so you can grow your email list. It works really well, and I would suggest, within Meet Edgar, actually going out there and creating categories for your lead magnet, so you can make sure every day, every week at least, that you're sending at least one pin out that is oriented towards collecting emails, because that's one of the strongest things that you can do with Pinterest. So this is what we were talking about here. I just also wanted to give you an idea of what she writes in her description. So remember, the pin consumes this graphic, a pin title, and then that little description part. And I think oftentimes we overthink the description, especially on Pinterest, and we're not super sure what to write. So you can see, super simple. She just goes ahead and puts exactly what it is. You want to remember that asking a question can be one of the most powerful things to do on social media, because if you ask an identifying question that someone says yes to, it's much more likely they're actually going to click on that content and visit the page. Because if you've gotten them to say yes already, then they've already opted in. So they're like, oh, well, I might as well click. So if you can ask a question in your description, it's a really good way of increasing your click-through rate on Pinterest. And then you can also notice that she goes ahead and gives that call to action at the end to check out the guides. So just super clear, writing what it is. Don't overcomplicate the descriptions. They don't have to be super long. They don't have to be complicated. Just a simple description there. So what can you do with your blog posts to pull out some of that content and make those descriptions really identifying so that people do want to click through on them? Another piece of content that she's done here that I wanted to show as the description is she made just a simple graphic that has the title of what you're going to actually get when you visit her blog here. And again, if you want to learn how to grow your Instagram following, check out these top accounts. Such a simple description, and it's also, again, having a conversation with the person, basically asking, do you want to learn this? This, again, is one of the best things you can do with your descriptive content on Pinterest. So look through what you're adding into your Meet Edgar library and ask if there's a good place you can have that identifying language in there. And then you'll notice down at the bottom of this description that she's actually using hashtags. So hashtags are categorized on Pinterest, not as much so as they are on Twitter or Instagram. So absolutely do not use as many hashtags as you might on like Instagram. I suggest sticking to 3 or 4 max. The hashtags will help Pinterest categorize what type of post this is. However, Pinterest also really looks at the words in your description and uses those very similarly to how Google uses words in order to give results back from a search. So the SEO, so the actual search engine optimization rules that exist for any blogs you're putting out there that you want people to find through Google, exist on Pinterest as well. So in your descriptions, when you're writing your content, think to yourself about what type of words your ideal audience, someone who is going to consume this content, would be searching, and put those into your description. I can't tell you enough how much a little bit of keyword research goes a long way. If you're not sure, one of my favorite tricks for learning what keywords might produce the best results on Pinterest is going to Pinterest yourself and using the search bar at the top of your Pinterest account. Go ahead and put in just some word that has to do with your business. So for example, with Meet Edgar, I could just go there and put in the word social media. The search bar on Pinterest is going to drop down a list of the most searched terms that has that word in it. So if I do that with social media, often it returns like social media ideas, social media tips, social media calendar. I want to use those long phrases in my description because those are the most searched terms on Pinterest already. So I want to already identify those bright spots so that my content is served up in the most searched terms. So do that for a few terms in your industry, in your niche, on the Pinterest search bar there, and make sure you're using that information and incorporating it into the descriptions. So this is one example of how she marketed this blog post. And you'll notice that she's gone ahead and made another graphic for this exact same blog post, but the description is exactly the same. So again, Pinterest does not penalize you for writing the same description or sharing the same link. What they want is a brand new graphic. So remember, with the evergreen nature of how Meet Edgar's schedule works in the last in, first out rotation, we will be repeating your pins, and it's fine to repeat pins. There's nothing that's going to go wrong with that unless you're repeating them more than 5 times in a month. But if this blog post has a different graphic with it, you can just copy and paste that description and use the same blog post with a different graphic, and you're good to go. Just again, a reminder there. All right, so one other thing that we have found work really well on Pinterest that I would like to inspire you to do is think about the content you have and how you can repurpose it on Pinterest. So this is our podcast, Social Post, where we interview different people about social media topics. Every time that we put a podcast episode out there, we send it off to a company called Rev to get it transcribed. Once it comes back, our social media manager, Maura, actually goes in and gets pull quotes from the transcripts. And this is one of the top driving traffic pins that we put out there are our podcast quotes. So the guests who have really great quotes out there, we put on backgrounds within Canva and go ahead and put the title of the podcast episode. And you can see we put our description super simple here. And this is just a very inspirational pin. People love these on Pinterest. We are seeing with our analytics that this gets the biggest click-through rate to our blog on Pinterest. Are these quotes from people? So if you're someone who interviews people, or even if you have a blog post that you write on your own, look for little pull quotes that you can actually go ahead and do these text overlays on so that you can try this strategy yourself. You can see we do this with every single blog post we put, or every single podcast episode we put out there. And it's a great way to get more out of the content you already have. It's a concept that we here at Edgar like to call upcycling. So that's taking one really well-researched piece of content and making multiple versions of it online so that it gets the most traffic and that people can consume that content in the medium that they like. All right. So I think we already talked about that. One other account that I really love to get inspiration from is Brita, the water filters. I know, such a weird one, but I think they do an excellent job of resonating with what's going on in people's lives, as well as having this consistency in their feed. So this is just a sample screenshot of what's going on their Pinterest feed right now. And you can see a lot of it is about going back to school hacks or going to college and the essentials you need. Of course, Brita is right up there. But you can see how they're really thinking about what's going on in people's lives and how they can resonate with those topics. So what's going on in your followers' lives that you could make some pins about that will actually catch their eye? Because when people are on Pinterest, they're searching for things that are going on in the world. So back to school just happened this fall. So it makes sense that a lot of people would be on Pinterest searching for what they should get for their dorm rooms and etc. So Brita takes advantage of that. So it's not that hard to do if you just have some conversations with your followers. I like to do this on Instagram and Twitter, is to go to some of my followers and DM them and actually ask them what's going on in their lives. Thanks, Aunt Maris. And then use what they're telling you those challenges are in those pins that you're actually making. Another thing that Brita does really well, again, is upcycling one concept that they've clearly found work well into multiple pins. So this here on their Pinterest account, they're very educational about basically what they're competing against. When you go to pick up something to drink, you're either going to choose water or probably something with sugar in it, right? Like a soda or some juice. So they know their competition out there are these other liquids you could choose to drink. So their educational pins here are all about how terrible sugary drinks are, but in a really entertaining way, right? So this says 5 sugary drinks a day for 1 year is twice the length of the Titanic in sugar cubes. That's just a really fun thing that you can look at, as well as getting their point across on why you should choose water over these other alternatives. So this piece of content has a job to do to educate you why they're the better choice. And I think you can get really creative with this in any industry. A lot of times the kind of classic example of this type of marketing strategy goes towards like Netflix. So Netflix is not just competing against other TV shows. Netflix isn't just competing against other streaming services. Netflix is competing for your attention on any leisure activity you could be doing, whether it be going on a horseback ride or gardening or reading a book. So they need to think about how they're going to get your time and attention to go towards Netflix rather than these other leisure activities. So get creative about how you can educate people on your industry in these ways that you're thinking, how they're competing against other things that people could spend their time or money on. So the idea behind Brita's campaign here goes even further, as you can see scrolling throughout the next few of these, that they're using the exact same concept. So how much 4 sugary drinks a day in this one is equal to how many slices of pie. If you're noticing here, the description on the right on this one says sugary drinks add up faster than you think. And you scroll and you'll notice the description is exactly the same again. So again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time on Pinterest. These different graphics with the same description and the same destination link work totally fine. One more example here, they go even further. 3 sugary drinks a day, the weight of 4,000 creative crayons. Now, this one, I don't know about you, convinces me to drink more water rather than eating 4,000 crayons. I know that's not the point, but you see how you can get creative with the educational content you're putting out there to really catch people's eyes and make it a lot more interesting. When you're creating your pins, I always love to remind people about what Pinterest's mission is. So again, we started talking a lot about social networks at the beginning, having different tendencies and natures for what people like to do on them. And Pinterest especially, they say that our mission is to help people discover things they love and do those things in real life. So Pinterest doesn't want you to live online. They want you to discover a project and go out and do that project. So this is a lot different than, again, like Twitter. Something really great to do on Twitter would be to share like a breaking news article, give your opinion about it, and then ask people what they think about it to get that conversation going. Pinterest doesn't really want you to do that. They want you to find a project, save that project, or click through to learn more about that project, and then get offline and go start doing it. So every piece of content that you're creating here should kind of have this in mind, that you're not looking for the engagement as much as you're looking for people to like save your pins, click through on your pins, and then take action on what you're trying to teach people with those pins. So it's not going to be something like, hey, buy our pizza cutter. Rather, it's going to be, see how our pizza cutter can make your life better. So anytime that you're looking at the calls to action that you might be adding to your Pinterest graphics or in your description, again, make sure it's focused on the lifestyle that people want and the outcome that they want after they purchase from you or do a project that you're putting out there. Pinterest really is a powerful search engine. So as you're brainstorming the type of content that you'd like to add into Meet Edgar for Pinterest, remember that it is one of the best traffic driving platforms. People are going to click through and go to your site. So the metrics I like you to pay attention to more than anything on Pinterest is if people are clicking on the content you're adding. So that means what you name things really matters on Pinterest. So your blog board shouldn't just be called blogs, because your boards that you're creating on Pinterest also drive the results people are seeing in their search engines. So if you just name something blogs, it doesn't have the keyword about what type of blogs it is. So we would want to say, social media blogs. You would want to say whatever your content is, blogs, so that your board can be indexed and cataloged in Pinterest appropriately. You want to put those keywords in everything you do, whether it's the board names or whether it's the actual descriptor there. So there is no way to bulk edit existing content to post on Pinterest, Joanna. You would have to actually go into Edgar and either add new content, or you can go ahead and use the content you have as long as it has an image on it there. You can bulk edit to add in your Pinterest connection within Edgar, but you can't like bulk edit new graphics in there. So within the Meet Edgar library, you'll notice there is a bulk edit button in the upper right corner. If you click to bulk edit, you'll be able to add in or remove networks there, but you will have to go in and like add the appropriate size graphic if you wanted to get that vertical Pinterest graphic there. Cool. So as we're going through, it really helps your board show up in the search engines if you're putting those keywords there. You really can also think about getting creative with the types of boards that you have and do like a best of board so that when people go ahead and visit you, they can see all of your best content. So the boards don't necessarily have to always be the type of content like a blog post or a tip or a creative project or something. It can just be like your best content or your inspirational content. There's no real kind of one size fits all for boards, except that I do want you to think about what you're naming your boards so that they can show up in those search engines. If you're new to Pinterest, I'd really love for you to think about adding 15 to 20 boards. It may sound like a lot, but it's really a great way to diversify the content you're putting out there to increase your brand awareness. And you always want to think about the fact that to increase your know, like, and trust on social media and to increase the availability of people to recognize your brand, you can do things that exist on other networks like behind the scenes content on Pinterest as well to make sure you're showing your face in some of the pins you're putting out there. You can think back to when we were looking at Melissa Griffin's Pinterest page about the fact she did have her face on some of those pins. She didn't on all of them, but it's a great way, again, to remind people there's an actual human being behind the content they're seeing on Pinterest, which just makes people be a little bit more loyal to your brand when they're reminded there's a person behind it and they're not just interacting with a logo. So think about some boards that will allow you to get your face out there and get that content out there that shows people, again, that there's a real person there. Also, when you're setting up your Edgar categories, you can do things like actually make different categories for each board, or you can make the same category go to multiple boards. Remember, when you're clicking to add new content into Edgar, when you click to add in the Pinterest permission on your account, you're going to go ahead and get the option to select what board it goes to. So if you're putting all of the categories to separate boards, that can be a good way to organize it in your library, but you can also have one category and go ahead and change what board it goes into within the Edgar. I also want you to think about the idea that Pinterest does allow video content and it allows actual photo content. Now, video content on Pinterest can be as short as just 4 seconds long or as long as 15 minutes. And I recommend going ahead and testing different video content on the platform because Pinterest has let us know that their smart feed algorithm actually is looking to diversify that type of content and they want more video out there. And you can best believe whenever a network tells you that they want a certain type of content, the algorithm is favoring that content. Your video content on Pinterest does not have to be complicated. One thing I like to do as kind of a hack and trick is to go into Canva, again, just a free graphic marketing tool that you can use. And within Canva, they have an elements section. The elements section has a lot of stickers and a lot of like arrows and stuff that move. They're very similar to like the stickers and arrows on Instagram stories that you can add in. If you go ahead and make a graphic with these moving stickers or with these moving arrows and you download that, it actually downloads as an MP4 from Canva. And when you upload that into Me Edgar, it'll upload as a video to go out. So it's not like you have to do a video of you speaking into a camera every time. You can get creative in doing just a normal graphic, but going ahead and adding in like a pointy arrow in Canva that moves around. And it's a great way to go ahead and boost your video views. If you have a ton of content, I always recommend making each pillar of your content its own board. So for example, here at Me Edgar, we like to stay really niche in what we speak about. And our pillars of content are going to be social media marketing, small business tips, and remote work because we're a remote company. We don't stray from those 3 things because we don't want to go too wide and try to please everyone because typically that means you're pleasing no one online. So I recommend coming up with different pillars and making those your boards as well. Again, you can have a lot of boards on Pinterest, so don't be afraid to test different things out. In the future, if you decide that board didn't work well and you no longer want to have it, you can always either remove it or just make it a secret board, which hides it from the public and only you will be able to see that content. On Pinterest, we here at Me Edgar are really big on this concept called headline generating for anything you do on social media. So what a headline generating concept is you just sitting down and writing multiple ways of expressing something until you get the best one. So for blog posts, we, for every blog post put out, come up with 20 different headline titles that it could be, and we choose the best one. The rest of them that we don't use, we actually use in our descriptions on Twitter or on Pinterest. So it's not a waste of time and it allows you to brainstorm the very best thing to name it. I know we all want to think we're copywriting geniuses and we get the best name every time on the first try, but we truly don't. So if you're someone who's never tried a headline generating strategy, as you're starting to make new boards and stuff on Pinterest, go ahead and actually think about the ways that you can brainstorm different names for each board. And then go ahead and look to how you can add more emotion and really resonate with people's identity. Because whenever you have emotion and stuff in the names that you're putting out there on social media, our brains are going to be much more likely to purchase. Even though we think we purchase on logic, we always purchase more on emotion as humans. So look for ways that you can get a little bit more emotional in the content and copy that you're putting out there. Yes, Colleen, do you recommend putting your current audience to see what type of content they would respond to, or just going for it? So I recommend both for sure. I know that's kind of a cop-out answer there, but if you can go ahead and go on something like like Instagram stories and do a poll asking people about what type of content they'd like to see from you, this not only gives you ideas, but doing this in a poll fashion in the stories on Instagram is incredibly helpful because the answers that you get are going to go right to your DMs. When that goes to your DM, Instagram's algorithm actually really loves to see people communicating on DMs, and it makes it more likely that your content will actually show up in their main feed if they see you communicating in a meaningful way over DMs. So doing a poll feature on Instagram and asking people what type of content they actually want to consume from you can be incredibly helpful in that way to get the algorithm to see that you DM. Another cool thing about that on Instagram is if you already have like a blog post or a piece of content that goes over something that someone says they're interested in, you can actually DM them that link back. Now on Instagram especially, links are not clickable within the main feed. So this is a really good hack for you to be able to just click through on that link in your Instagram DMs and have people actually be able to direct traffic from Instagram to your site. So it serves as a twofold practice there if you're a little frustrated with having to pull your audience in that way. But I also recommend, not waiting to hop on Pinterest until you have those answers. Just go ahead and start creating those pins, go ahead and get those keywords out there, and then start to optimize for what you see is working. So I definitely recommend whenever you can get more information from your audience, do so. But don't wait until you think you have the best information to start on Pinterest, because at least some of the content that you have is going to resonate with people. So definitely start just posting and seeing what's working, but thinking of ways that you can actually pull your audience too. Reminding too that you can cross-post like one blog post on multiple boards. When you add it into Meet Edgar, when you add it into your library, you would have to add it as separate content. At the moment, you cannot post something to multiple boards at the same time. But just as another idea for you to increase the amount of pins you're putting out there, you can post a blog post on your blog pin board. And then let's say you also make a board. So for us here at Meet Edgar, maybe we make a board called Social Media Tips. I could post a blog post on my blog post board and my social media tips board, and that same piece of content can go to both of them. You're not going to be penalized by Pinterest. Again, the nature is a little bit different than the other networks, but Meet Edgar's way of adding it to your library makes it work really well for getting multiple pins out throughout the day and week. Then start paying attention to what boards are most popular to really start to get the idea of what you should start putting out there and creating your pins in a way that you're able to get new graphics. So this is what we were going over at the beginning, that Pinterest really sees a new graphic as a new pin. So you can use the same description, use the same URL, just make sure that you have a new graphic out there. So if you're doing this for blog posts, or you can always replace the word blog with things like podcasts, whatever type of medium you put out there, I always recommend putting a little bit of a summary or a pull quote from there. Put an image with a text overlay and the link to the article. You want to make sure those are the three things that you do have in there. You want to always make templates so that you're recognizable and you're working smarter, not harder, so you can just pop in the new information to those templates. If someone does see that template that they really like and it's going to trigger their brain recognition in the future, it's much more likely they'll click through on it. So I can't stress enough how much I suggest using Canva and going ahead and having your colors all laid out in there so you can download those images and upload them into Pinterest. But you also need to make multiple versions of your pin graphics. Again, what we were speaking to at the beginning of making sure that when you are having one piece of content out there, that on your checklist is to make 5 different graphics for it so you can add all of those into Edgar at once. I'm going to go ahead and try my luck sharing my screen here so I can show you how you can actually do this in Edgar on one piece of content. If my screen drops here while I'm doing this, please sit tight for 5 seconds. I will be right back, and I do apologize in advance if that happens. However, let's go ahead and look here. As I'm sharing my screen, within Meet Edgar, when you click to add new content here, you're brought to our composer. If you're making 5 different graphics for one Pinterest post, so again, I'm checking off Pinterest, I'm putting it on my blog post board, I'm gonna go ahead and write my description and then upload a photo from my computer using this little icon in the lower left corner here. I'm gonna go ahead and click on open, and that's gonna be great. I'll fill out my destination link of where I want people to go here. So this is gonna be my original pin here that I've already added. I could just go ahead and save this, or I can go ahead and scroll down, and you'll notice I can click to manually add a variation. When I add a variation, a second text box pops up. Again, I can go ahead and use the same description here if I want, but then I can go ahead and use a different image from my computer. So when you're making those 4 or 5 different graphics, I can now come in here, choose a different image that I've made, upload that different image to the second variation. Now, these variations are going to go out in a last in, first out rotation based on when that category is on your schedule. So on your Meet Edgar schedule here, if you're not familiar with it, this is a weekly schedule based on the categories. This week repeats over and over again. I myself have a special blog post category for my pins. You don't have to, you could totally use your existing blog post category, whatever makes most sense for you. With the variations, how these time slots are working is a last in, first out rotation, and the variations work in the same way too. So when that whole post is up in your rotation based on when this time slot comes up, Edgar is going to choose the last variation that you added to that pin, go ahead and post it on out to Pinterest. He'll then take that whole post and put it to the category. The next time that whole post is up in your rotation based on when that time slot's on your schedule, he'll take variation number 4. So let's say there are 5 variations on it. He's going to send variation number 5 first. He's then going to take that whole post and put it to the end of the line in the category. The next time that whole post is up, he'll take variation number 4 and send it out, put it to the end of the line in the category. So this is where the automation can come in incredibly handy for you to actually go in there, create a graphic, create a video, create multiple versions of the graphics, all on those same variations for that post, and have Edgar rotate through them, making sure your feed stays really fresh and Pinterest sees every new graphic or video as a new pin. So that's going to be your best bet, I think, for just batching your content, is making a goal for yourself to go on in there and do that. There is one really quick hack that I'd love to show you here. And this is for using our browser extension along with Pinterest marketing. Now, this is something that you're not going to be optimizing your graphics as much if you use this, in the sense that you're not going to go into Canva and actually make these graphics that I've been speaking to, but it's one of the fastest ways to get pins into Meet Edgar. So let me go ahead and share my screen again. So our extension, which I'll put into the chat if you haven't downloaded it yet, helps you add blog posts from any blog. So this is our blog here, but this could be any article you find online. When I go ahead and click on this little Edgar icon in the upper corner here, it's going to go ahead and bring up my add new content to library screen. So I don't have to spend the time copying and pasting this back and forth in my account. I can just click on my browser extension here. So now all I need to do is tell Edgar I'd like to send this to my blog post board on Pinterest. I've made a separate blog post pins category. You can see Edgar has already copied the blog link into the blog destination, so you can go ahead and remove it from this description section if you want, or you can leave it there. If you leave the pin title empty, Edgar's just going to title it whatever this blog post is titled, or if you'd like to override that and have your own title, you can always override it there. Here is where the magic comes in. So if you're doing this with a blog post with a URL, you'll notice you also have a suggest variation section. If I click suggest variations, what Edgar's going to do is get 5 different pull quotes from within this blog post. So you can see these variations were already written for me. So this has the description of what the pin is going to say already written here. So he uses something called natural language processing to go into that blog post, find little key snippets, and go ahead and put those as separate destination, or as separate, excuse me here. So from there, you already have your description written, right? You already have 5 variations. You'll also notice when you have a URL that you get something here called suggested media. So suggested media is just going to be the images that are being pulled from what's on that blog post. So these images are images we've added to our blog post. You could just go in here and click to add an image, and this image will be what sends to Pinterest. It might not be the perfect vertical kind of 2:1 ratio that they do recommend, but it'll still be an image. It'll just be a little square one in the feed, which sometimes can get a little bit smushed if people are optimizing for those vertical pins, but it'll still send to Pinterest. So you could do this all without having to do anything, but click on the browser extension, click to auto-generate variations, and then scroll down and choose different suggested media images here, and go ahead and do that for each and every variation. This is all done for you then. Once you save it to your library, you have 5 different descriptions with 5 different images already made for you. So again, here's the flow. You come to a blog post. So this is our blog post here. I click on my Meet Edgar icon. I go ahead and I click to add Pinterest to my pin board. I go ahead and I add it to my blog post pin. I scroll down and click suggest variations. I go ahead and on every variation, add a different suggested media image here. And then I save it to my library. And I've just made 5 pins here within about a 2-minute period. Now, of course, you can optimize and do your own variations, but I think this is one of the fastest ways to produce the most content into Edgar for Pinterest. So go ahead and try that. If you don't have our extension yet, I'm gonna go ahead and grab it from our help center so that we get you that extension. But yeah, let me know. We've got 15 more minutes here within our hour batching party. Let me know what questions you guys have about either adding content into Meet Edgar for Pinterest or just Pinterest specific strategy. And I'm happy to answer those either here or Margot, who's our representative at Pinterest. I can always email her questions and she can get you the answer there. But yeah, let me know what else you guys are interested in learning. I'm gonna go ahead and pop our help article right into the blog right here. And that's where you can download the extension to your browser if you want. Terry, yes, I will be emailing out the recording afterwards. So keep an eye on your email within the next hour or so, and you'll be able to find the recording once it's done processing. With the multiple variations batch, do those go out the same day or are they scheduled? So you're adding those to a category within Meet Edgar. Now within Edgar, there's 2 ways of scheduling. One is on that weekly repeating schedule, and the other is going to be manually scheduling your content. So for Pinterest, since it is a search engine, you want to make sure the content you're putting out there is pretty evergreen, because a pin you put out there 3 months ago, if someone searches for a specific topic that your pin's about, that's going to go ahead and show up in their search results, even if you pinned it 3 months ago. So most of the content you're putting out on Pinterest should be used with your weekly repeating evergreen schedule. So when you add the content to the library with that browser extension, it goes into the category you assigned it to. So if I assigned it to my blog post pin category, the next time the next time that time slot is on my schedule will be when that post goes out. So remember, Edgar works in a last in, first out rotation based on when those categories are on your schedule. If that piece of content that I added with the extension is the most recent post that I added to my category in the library, that will be the next post to go out when Edgar reaches that category on the schedule. Now, for the variations, remember again, he's working last in, first out on the variations and the content. So if you put variations on one piece of content, that's still seen as one piece of content to Edgar. So he's going to choose the last variation on that piece of content, send it out. Then he's going to take that whole post and put it to the end of the line in the category. And Edgar is going to work his way through all of the posts in that category. Once he reaches the bottom and there are no new posts in that category, that's when he'll start from the top again and he'll start sending out the other variations. So kind of a good rule of thumb as you're getting used to this weekly repeating schedule is you'll know how often things are going to repeat, all based on the ratio of how many posts you have in a category versus how many times that category is on the schedule. So let's say you add 10 posts to your Pinterest category and you put your Pinterest category on the schedule once. It'll be 10 weeks before Edgar cycles through the content. If you put it on your schedule twice, it'll be 5 weeks before Edgar cycles through the content. Again, one piece of content with multiple variations is still seen as one piece of content. Edgar's just going to work through those variations. I know that I talk kind of fast sometimes, so I'm going to go ahead and get you this playlist right here. That workflow that I just suggested there, Anna Maris is going to be in the automations rule video of this YouTube playlist. These are our onboarding videos. It'll say how to schedule automation rules and evergreen content, and that'll explain how those time slots work. The other way of scheduling in Edgar is done on a more one-off basis, and that's for the date-specific posts. So if you wanted to send a pin out, this works a lot better for other social networks in my opinion, but if you need to send a pin out on a specific day, you can manually schedule content in Edgar on the Add New Content screen. And I'll share my screen real quick and show you how you do that. But when you come on in here and you go to Meet Edgar, you'll notice that after you write your content, check off where it should go, assign it to a category. When you scroll down, rather than saving it to your library, you'll have this little drop-down arrow, and you can also click Schedule, Send, and Save, and this will pop up a text box. If you click Schedule, Send, and Save, and that text box pops up there, this date and the very first time Edgar's going to post out will be when this date and time is reached. He'll send it out. He'll send it out to the accounts that are attached over here on the left. At which point, after he sends this is like a holiday post under advanced settings. You could mark it as used to make sure Edgar knows to expire it after it sends. Or if not marked as used once and it's been assigned to a category that's on your weekly repeating schedule. After Edgar sends it, manually scheduled date and time. It'll go to the end of the line in the category. And then whenever that category is on your schedule, that's when it'll go ahead and be back into that rotation. So those are two. Anything on social media, but you lost sound. Hopefully it's doing okay. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. So how often you should post on Pinterest. So there's a lot of different philosophies behind this. Again, you can get away with posting way more on Pinterest than you can the other networks. What I would suggest doing is starting at least posting at least once a day on Pinterest. But if you can, post up to 5 times a day to get started. I know that sounds kind of like a lot, but if you have enough content that you can do that with, you are really going to see a lot more traffic with the more pins you put out there. You know, on Facebook, sometimes you're penalized for posting too much. If you're not getting the great engagement rates, you're not going to show it to people. Pinterest doesn't do that. I also think that timing doesn't matter as much on Pinterest as the other networks, but if you wanted to really optimize, Pinterest says the time that most people are on the platform is after 8 p.m. or weekends, which makes a lot of sense when you think about what people are doing on Pinterest. They're looking for activities, they're looking for inspiration for projects. So if you can post at these times where people are actually looking for that time to actually start a new project, like on Saturday morning or after the kids are in bed, stuff like that, those are going to be the times you want to kind of optimize for. But again, it's not as important as the other networks because it is much more of a search engine. Can you speak more to how search results work? Yeah, sure. So when you go to Pinterest, when you go to Pinterest here, let me share my screen again. You'll notice that you do have this little search bar right up here. So when you're searching, search results do show you specific pins. They also show you boards. Again, the keywords matter so much. So if I say social, so again, when I was recommending going ahead and putting in like words in your industry, so if I say social media here, these are the things, these are the keywords that I want to add into my description so that my pins show up in these the most. So like social media quotes, stuff like that. You can also see this is a specific person, so not person, but account, you know, social media examiner comes up, stuff like that. So these here are the actual words you want to use for your keywords. So on your actual like home feed, when you come into that home feed, depending upon what is in your home feed is much more personalized than other networks as well, based upon what you've searched in the past and what you've saved in the past. So if your audience is searching and saving content similar to your niche, it's likely Pinterest might actually choose one of your pins and put it in that person's feed because they recognize the keywords in the description of your pins is similar to other stuff that people have actually searched past. So I really do suggest thinking about that. You know, it's not, again, like you have to follow someone for your content to show up in their feed. Pinterest might say, okay, this person's searching social media a lot. This account here has a lot of social media content. Let me try putting that in someone's home smart feed. So that again is why you really want to optimize for keywords and really know the keywords that your audience is interacting with the most. And once you can get that down, you're going to see a lot more impressions on Pinterest. Pinterest also has a really cool kind of academy if you're looking to know more. That they give like examples that I really love reading through to get inspiration. And they're really quite open with the examples they're giving about like showing what other accounts have done. So I'd suggest it's completely free. You have to sign up and give your email address, but you don't have to pay anything or anything like that. And this is where I've learned a lot about Pinterest. I'll put that right there. So I'd go through those. Again, they're just a few articles that have like business examples of how other people have used Pinterest, and I find it super valuable. So I'd go ahead and check that out as well. I will send the recording to this webinar here. Margot, who is our Pinterest rep that I suggested before, also did a Pinterest basics webinar for us, and I'll send that in the email. But she's also gone ahead and let us know that she'll do like an up-level Pinterest webinar with us in the future. So if you have like specific questions that you'd like to ask Pinterest, go ahead and email me at support@meetedgar.com, and I'd love to send those over to her to make sure that we're getting those questions answered. Is there a place in your training that Edgar speaks of content creations? So we have a lot of different content creating resources, Colleen. I would suggest going, more of the pillar content. That's a good question. I don't know if we specifically have anything for that, but we have a lot of blog posts that talk about how we upcycle our pillar content. And I have your email address, Colleen. So after the call today, I just want to make sure that I'm finding the best ones for you, but I'll send you a direct email with some of the blog post resources that we have on kind of how we upcycle our pillar content to give you a little bit more of an idea behind that as well. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll send that. I'll just send that in the replay email to anyone who registered. I'll put a little PS with links to that in there. But yeah, if you guys do have more stuff about Pinterest you want to learn, let me know. If you go ahead and go to our YouTube channel as well, there's a lot of demos on how to use Pinterest with Meet Edgar. I'll put that in there. So like, if you want more like feature stuff on how to use Edgar, I check out that YouTube video there, and it goes over again just the little specificities behind putting those on boards and stuff. Or of course, like I mentioned, email support@meetedgar.com or come to an office hour session and we can always go over stuff in the future. I hope this was helpful for you guys today and gave you a little more ideas about how to upcycle the content you have to make sure that it's getting out on Pinterest and stuff like that. Keep in touch with us. We love doing content batching parties like this to give you guys inspiration, but we also want to make sure they're super useful. So any feedback that you have, send it on over to support@meetedgar.com. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. And I'll send out that replay email after this is done processing in the next couple of minutes. Ooh, one on Instagram. All right, that's a really good one. We don't have that scheduled, but I am glad you gave us that tip. Yeah, we might do more network specific ones if people find them interesting rather than just kind of content creation in general. So I'll bring that up to Maura once we're planning our calendar for next month and see if we can fit that in. Yeah, cool. Thanks for that suggestion there. Awesome. Well, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Let me know if you have any other questions and I'll send out that replay email shortly. Have a good one, everyone.